All right, so I'm going to try sharing my screen and showing you the workspace that I'm working in. I'm working in ToonBoom Harmony, which is an excellent program to work in if you want to do animation from start to finish in the 2D mode. I also use ToonBoom to draw. If I want to just draw something and clean it up and paint it, then it's an excellent software program for that. It's also kind of complicated. And so one of the nice things about CG Spectrum is we teach you not only how to animate so that you could draw in any program, but we teach you specifically how to animate in ToonBoom Harmony. And as a result, you can learn a lot of really interesting tools. But there's a whole world of tools out there in ToonBoom Harmony that will take you a long time to accomplish. So I'm just going to show you the basics of it if you take one of the CG Spectrum classes, enough to get by. So today I'm not going to talk too much about ToonBoom tools. I'm just going to talk about cleanup animation in general. I want to show some examples of how it works and why you need it and where I'm at in this project. And then I'll just get into it and start working. And you can see how fun it is and how long it takes. Right, so the goal in my scene is eventually I want to have my character inked and painted. That means I've got a line drawn around the character and I've got colors that fill in the character's body. And I'm also going to have a foreground element, which isn't complete yet, but eventually it will be. And then theoretically, I will have a background of some kind too that I can put behind this, which right now it looks like this. So if all goes according to plan, when the scene is done, whenever that day comes, it will look something like this. It will be the owl running in and sitting at the classroom table, and it talks too, but I'm not going to mess with the sound today. Just going to worry about cleanup drawings and how you accomplish them in ToonBoom. And so I'm going to turn some of this stuff off and get rid of the foreground element. And then we'll just take a look at the actual animation itself. So if I turn off the layer that has cleanup on it, we can see the actual animation. And I'll just scrub through it once so you can see it slowly and get kind of an idea of what this character is doing. And then I'll scrub through it, or I'll play through it a little bit faster. I'll play it at speed actually, and then you can see how the animation is looking so far, assuming it's playing at a nice healthy speed. But so this is the foundation animation that I worked on originally. So now I'm just going to go ahead and play it. And the character is talking. The character says something to the effect of animation's easy. You just have to ease into it. And like I said, I'm not going to talk about the animation too much today. That's a whole nother subject and something that you can learn if you take one of our classes. But let's just assume for now that you've got animation and it's roughed out and you have everything that you need in order to make this cleanup pass, which is where we go from doing a rough pass, which is what you're seeing on my screen right now, to the final product, which is what I was just showing you a minute ago, which is this. All right, so I've already set up some cleanup keys. I'm just going to turn off some of the elements that I don't need so that they won't get in the way. One of the things that is crucial about cleanup is that you make your life as easy as possible, because you have to basically do detail work. If you think about painting details on a car or something, another way I like to think of it is if you're drawing on glass or painting on glass. And as it happens, the original ink and paint artists, the people who were creating cleanup in the first place, were drawing on plastic sheets of celluloid, and they would paint on one side with the line and then flip the drawings over and paint on the other side. And so it was essentially one step removed from the original drawings that animators would do. If you know anything about animation, you draw it out, you sketch it. Well, cleanup was you place another sheet of paper or celluloid on top of the drawing, and then you have to go and render it out again, one step removed from the original animation. Part of the job of cleanup, part of the challenge of cleanup, is you have to retain what's there in the original animation, not lose the vitality and the life that you see, and yet make it look nice and clean. I did this job at Disney and DreamWorks for several years in the 90s, worked on some of the big projects there, and got pretty good at it. And our goal before computers came along was we needed to be able to draw like a vector. We needed to be able to draw thick and thin and make the line absolutely perfect. And using mechanical pencils and paper. Well, we can use vector lines in programs like ToonBoom and CC Animate and get a perfect computer line, but we still have to be able to draw. You still have to understand volume and mass and how to make a good drawing and how to make your lines look like something more than something that a vector program did for you. So that's one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit today too. But first of all, I'm going to show you that I've actually gone in and done some work on these characters so far. I've actually done a lot of keys on this drawing, on the scene from the start. So let me just show you those, and then I'm going to start drawing, and I'll just work and point out anything that I think is actually worth mentioning as I go. But first, let me turn off the roughs, and then I'll just show you the work that I have in progress. So here we have the keys that I've done, including the last one. This one is a drawing I'm not finished with. I'm going to start by finishing that one off today, and then I'll proceed from there. But these are the keys, the key drawings that I've completed via cleanup in the scene so far. So not too many of them. This is a scene that has about 165 frames in it. If I was doing this on twos, which means I draw every 2 frames, that is roughly half of 170. I'm not a math person. I don't even know what that. So like 80 drawings theoretically. So it's a lot. There's a lot of work. But fortunately, with ToonBoom and programs like it, you can do a lot of cutting and pasting and copying things, and it's easier using a computer in some ways to copy and paste things and make it work that way than it is to do it on paper. But in some ways, paper drawing is easier. And I've never yet met a computer program that makes it as easy to clean things up as it is to do it on paper, where you're actually physically grinding your pencil line into the paper. But I've also, in paper, hand animated drawing, not been able to get the kind of perfect system we have here. And this is just faster. It's just absolutely faster to cut and paste things in software than it is to try and do that by hand with a kneaded eraser and your pencil. So anyway, so those are some of the drawings that I've done so far. And the way you do cleanup is you turn on your lower level in ToonBoom. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about it. That's stuff we cover in the classes. But if you know anything about animation, you know I've got a rough pass and then on one layer, and then I'm doing a cleanup pass on the upper layer. You might also know that I did the rough pass, the rough drawings with what's called a bitmap pencil, digital pencil in ToonBoom that allows you to be very rough and kind of dirty with your lines. If I zoom in on this, you can see I drew really, really rough. And that's because I was trying to capture the spirit of the thing and not necessarily grab all the details. So it's okay to draw rough. In fact, it's encouraged when you're animating. And then you can go in and clean it up on another layer, like I've got here, and get these really clean lines and get all the details. Like so. So if you look at that, that's not only is it clean, but it's something that I could color in later. It's not quite perfect yet. I probably would still go back and fix some things. But one of the things that's hard to wrap your mind around when you're doing cleanup work is that not every drawing has to be perfect. It only has to work while it's moving. And as long as you can see with persistence of vision, as long as you can see that the thing looks like it's one character and it's moving and morphing and shaping, you're good to go. Back in the olden days of cartoons, in Warner Brothers cartoons, there's a couple of notorious Wile E. Coyote moments where the character's not even painted in. And somehow they missed that when they were shooting it. And nobody cared because it was moving so fast and moving at speed. And so there is some leeway with that. But you do want to do the best job you can and make it really nice. And ideally, you want to make it so that you don't have to go back and do any corrections later. But on this one, I probably will. One last thing before I get into drawing is if you're good, if you're smart, and if you're not me on this particular scene, you would have set up charts. If you look at the bottom of my screen, I'll drag this up a little bit, you can see, and if I get this out of the way, you'll see that I have all these red marks and blue marks. And those red marks indicate keys, key drawings, key poses, key snapshots of where the character was in time and space at that frame. And then everything that's gray in between, those are what we call in-betweens. They're in-between drawings that get you from one key to the next one. And so we like to mark the keys with red in ToonBoom, and then we mark breakdowns, which are kind of sub-keys or lesser keys. We mark those with blue. And so that's how I'm keeping track of which drawings I'm doing in what order. If I was smart, I would have drawn a chart for this scene, which gives me a skeleton, an outline, something that I can map my progress with, the order of the drawings I did, and what weight they have if they are, halfway between keys or if they're a third between keys. Again, this is all stuff that we cover in class. I'm not going to go over that too much, but the point is that I want to, that I just want to make sure and know the direction that I'm going in and know that I have done it in the right order. And because I did this scene and I worked on it for a very long time, I actually know exactly which drawings I did and which ones to work on in which order. Plus, just for the record, I'm doing this in a kind of backwards, straight ahead way, meaning I'm just starting from the back and working my way forward for the first pass, because these are just key poses. It almost doesn't matter which order I do them in. I'm looking for how to keep sizes and volumes and details consistent so that when I go to fill in everything that's in between, everything will look consistent and everything's going to look with persistence of vision when it plays at speed like it's all part of the same scene, and that the character is not hundreds of drawings, but just one character moving through the scene. So without any more gabbing, I'm going to just jump into this and start drawing. And like I said, I'll point out some of the tools I'm using as I go and anything that I think is pertinent. But beyond that, I'm just going to start drawing. And if anyone has any questions, because I know who you are, but if anyone's curious, you can write into to chat and give me some practice on responding to people when they're chatting, because that's one more thing, right? So to get started with this drawing in particular, I've already begun, as I said, I'm going to start before I even draw any lines by just showing this off, because I'm going to do it a lot, but I'm not going to talk about it a lot. I'm just going to mention this right now and then get on with it. But there's this tool called the cutter tool. If I highlight my cursor, you can see on the screen, I placed it over to the left. And if you click on it, you'll see that usually it's a selector tool. That's like any program. You can select a line and manipulate it and do things with it. Right now, that's all it does. But if I change it to this thing called a cutter, then I have the ability to take parts of my scene out by just cutting them like so. And that's all fine and well. That's great. That's something that we needed. But at the same time, this cutter tool allows me to eliminate parts that I've overdrawn. So for example, if I draw, let's just draw something real quick, draw something like this, and I want to cut off the ends of it, I can use the cutter tool to drag onto that excess part and just get rid of it. And so that means I can overdraw things. I can draw past the line where I wanted to stop and cut it off later. It's not always something that you want to do. It's sometimes easier to just go back and draw the whole line. But I'm going to do that for now. I'm going to start with that. So what you're seeing now is me using the cutter tool and cleaning up some of my cleanup drawings and just getting started with that. So off we go. Imagine all the great music in your head that you're missing, in my head that you're missing, where you can sing your own songs. Now, sometimes the cutter tool doesn't work, so there are other ways to get around it, but I'm just going to start off with that and see how much I can get rid of by doing it that way. Another thing that can happen is using the cutter tool, you can sometimes eliminate an entire line and you didn't mean to. So there's an example of that where I used the cutter tool on the outside edge and it took too much. So I'll fix that up later. But I'm just going to try as many cutter options as I can and just see how much of this junk I can clear out just by using the tool. Also, too, sometimes it helps if you just get really inside there. The bottom line is you don't want to spend too much time on any of these details because you could be drawing all this time. There's a certain amount of energy expenditure that goes with doing something like this. It's not that easy to do this for long periods of time. It requires focus and it requires attention. It's also helpful if you play something fun to listen to because it can be kind of boring. Or not so much boring, but just it can be sort of tedious. And those of us who did this for a living for days and days and days on end got very used to listening to books and on audio books and just anything we could find online to stream, or back in the old days, CDs. But so yeah, you don't want to spend too much time doing this, but I'm doing this over and over just to show what it looks like. Another thing that's handy while you're doing this process to set up hotkeys. So if you know you're going to be doing something over and over again, you can set up hotkeys, shortcut keys for tasks that you're going to do a lot. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But I'm just going to finish off the last of these on the hand and see if it goes for it. If it doesn't, then I'll just move on. So, but you can hopefully see that this is a nice way to clean up a scene quickly by using this cutter tool. You can just draw over things and then go back. The question, thanks, Renato. How long does it take to finish cleaning up the entire scene with just one character? It depends. Back in the Disney days, we were expected to do a drawing an hour. In a situation like this, I'm obviously taking more time because I'm showing how to do it. And also, I'm getting warmed up as I do this. Eventually, you might be able to do a drawing in a half an hour, and then a drawing like this, if you can get it down to 15, 20 minutes, then you can be sure of finishing the scene really quickly and have some fun with drawing rather than just going in and fussing around like this. So that was an excellent question, Renato. Thank you. All right, so then another thing you can do once you've got lines already is you can go in and fix them up using this contour editor. This works like Illustrator and other programs that have vector lines with points on them. And so you can go in and fix up the vector points and get lines to connect and not overshoot the point where you want it to meet up. Again, you don't need to spend all day with this because this is what it's going to look like. Actually, something like this is what it'll finally look like. And so you don't want to spend a whole lot of time going in here and messing with all these little details when they're not even going to be seen. But I definitely want to clean up the brow a little. So I would probably use the contour editor for that. Or maybe another option, there's an erase tool. And in this case, maybe I just want to go in and erase the dang thing and call it a day. So that's also an option too. This line not being perfect, not the end of the world. But so a combination of the contour editor, which you can use to move points on your drawings like this, the eraser, and then the cutter tool, you can eventually whittle this down to being as nice a drawing as you could hope to have. As much or as little as you want to do to this thing. It's to your personal drawings. It's up to you how perfect you want to make them. If you were doing this professionally, you'd probably want to make it as perfect, and they'd also probably be paying you. And so you have more inspiration to make this absolutely perfect. But for my purposes, as long as it doesn't look too nasty when it's playing at speed, then I'm doing pretty well. So those are just a couple of the tools that I'm going to be using a lot once I start drawing. So I'm not going to talk about them again too much. I'm just going to use them. But if you were watching, then you'll see that those are the tools that I was using, and that's part of the cleanup process. All right, so having gotten through all that, I'm going to stop with the detail work and now do some actual drawing. And as I said, this is something that requires the ability to have a really steady hand and a lot of patience and a lot of determination to want to clean up your own scene. And it starts with looking at the actual work itself. And to do that, I turn on the onion skin function, which again, I ordinarily would have a hotkey for it, but I turn on the onion skin tool, and that gives me the ability to see any drawings around my current drawing. So if I expand this in the timeline, you can see there's where my last drawing was. Pull out on that a little bit. You can see that that's my previous one. I don't, the one I did just before this, I don't have another one after that. I'm using my original animation more than I'm actually using other cleanup drawings. So for this process, the onion skin isn't really that necessary, but it's good to know it's there. I'll use it later. What I'm really going to use at this point is just having the rough layer on underneath and then flipping from drawing to drawing. By flipping, what I mean is I'm looking at other drawings and comparing my work. So I look at one drawing that I'm currently working on and then flip it and look at another drawing that I was previously working on. And by doing that, I can see my work in motion. And that might be a better way to go than at this point than using the onion skin tool. So now you can see the lower drawing. You can see the one I've created, and you can see the ones around it. And you can see the other key that I did, the other cleanup key. And based on those, I'm going to go ahead and finish this off. All right, so, and just for the record, again, this isn't so much a class in ToonBoom as just showing off cleanup, but I've got this set up so I can flip back and forth between this key quickly by highlighting up in the upper left-hand corner of ToonBoom. There's a key button, and then I can just flip using these controls up at the top of the screen. So that's just a special way of setting it up so you can look back and forth between your other keys and see the difference. When we were doing this professionally, we wanted to make it so that we were actually drawing while the drawings were moving, and that's your best bet. But until that's possible, the best idea is to just flip back and forth between drawings as best you can so you get an idea of what the motion is going to be. All right, so I'm going to get in here and just draw some of these lines. I'm using the pencil tool. The pencil tool currently doesn't have anything like a contour on it. I want it to be really blocky and not have too much tapering on the end of it. I've also increased the smoothing a little bit so that if my hand wiggles as I draw, then I won't have to worry too much. Without smoothing on, I'll just show this off, it's fun. If I draw this without smoothing and I try to draw a smooth line, you can see that my line is going to look like that. And when you draw, you'll probably end up drawing really slowly, but you can see there are all these imperfections. If I turn up the smoothing, you can see if I draw a line right next to this other one and do it at the same speed I was doing it, it's crooked when I draw it, but then it snaps into shape. And so you can see the difference between the two of them. It just gives you a little bit of extra control. And I need that control. That makes my drawings better. And I've learned to work with it on. Some people don't like it, but I think it makes for a better drawing for me personally. All right, so I'm going to start with the hand and zoom in on it nice and close so I can make a nice drawing. Now, there's a good example of when smoothing went too far. So I tried to draw the outside edge of the thumb, and I lost this edge that I had. I'll undo that so you can see it again. There's an edge here, and I lost it because I tried to do it all in one. I tried to go here, and then you can see that it smoothed it out too much. It made it too round. So in a case like that, I'd probably drop the smoothing back down. These hands are pretty detailed, and so it's best to keep it low. Another thing you might notice is I've got this thing set up so that when I draw two lines, they want to connect to each other. That's just a setting that's in ToonBoom. I have a hotkey for that I set up so I can turn it off. So if I turn it off and I draw two lines close together, didn't turn it off. If I turn it off, and it's still on. If I turn it off, then it's not going to work anymore. But right now it's set to go. If my hotkey doesn't work, and sometimes the best of intentions, it doesn't work. Over here on the right, underneath all the pencil settings, you can turn it on and off that way. So you can see now it doesn't want to connect anymore. It leaves two lines separate. So in this case, I'll probably just leave it off, and I'll leave this open since the hotkey doesn't seem to want to work right now. And then I've turned the smoothing down. I'll turn it down a little bit more and get on with it. All right, so now I can draw this edge, and then I can decide if I want to bleed my line inside to the next part. I can add drawings, lines. Just keep in mind that every line you add, you're creating more and more vector lines with their own points. So I'm highlighting these. So if I draw a line like this and then I select it, you can see that that's how many points it took. And each one of these points is obviously malleable. And maybe you don't want that many points. So if you have a whole bunch of junk that you've drawn, like so, then you can imagine it's going to have a whole bunch of points on it too. Each one of these is going to have their own individual points. And that can get pretty messy. So the less scratchiness that you do, the less scratchy drawings you do, the better off you are if you want to go back and edit, unless that's your personal style, which is fine. But here, I'll just go in and do the fingers. I'm just going to stop these where they are. I'm drawing through the pencil because I'm going to add it later. And I'm trying to just connect these lines because I don't really want to use the cutter right now. It probably would take me longer to use the cutter than to just go in and draw this. And then I can always go back and fix it up later. So I like to work really close. I'm used to working really close. I actually, when I would do this for a living, I had my face pressed up to the drawing table. And as a result of that, I actually got injured once. I'm not going to say how because I don't want to make anybody sick, but did something to my eye. And now we don't have to worry about that because of vector lines and computer enhancements with software programs. There is no paper. There's no way to injure yourself. I guess you could be electrocuted. So I'm going in here and just drawing these lines, and then I will check this with the drawing next door and go, okay, does that look like this is the same drawing? Did I lose any volume? I may have lost some volume down there in the elbow. I'll check that later. But for all intents and purposes, it looks all right. So I have the pencil on this layer, and what I've been doing is just cutting and pasting it. So this is where the cutter tool comes in handy. I can go in here and marquee select the cutter tool, copy it, which is just Control C, move over to this drawing and then paste it, and then I can place it wherever I want and clean it up. And sometimes that's faster, sometimes it's slower. It's all a matter of whether or not it's going to take more or less time. In this case, it's a solid object, so I want it to maintain its size throughout the whole scene. It's an inanimate object, so I'm not going to go in and draw it every time. That would make it look wiggly and make it lose its original shape, and we don't want that for something organic. So I just went ahead and copied and pasted it. Now you can see that there's all this junk that I got from the other drawing. I'll go ahead and try to cut that off. If I can't cut it off using the cutter tool, then I'll either erase it or I'll move it using the contour editor, which is just selecting the individual vector points and getting rid of them that way. I can also extend the pencil line. It's not going to go all the way here through the finger, so I can fix that up in just a second. Let me just clean some of this up. You can see that sometimes the cutter tool is actually taking me longer than it would be to just either erase it or draw it again or use the vector contour tool. It also makes a difference if I'm zoomed in more, and maybe that will help me get to a place where it's able to kind of go, oh yeah, that's part of an extended line that you didn't want. Great. So you can see it's doing a little bit better now. You can also use the contour editing button to just get rid of stuff. Just delete it if it works, which it doesn't. So, and then I can use this to marquee around stuff and get rid of it that way too. But it's nasty right now. There we go. Okay, so once I've done as much as I can with the cutter, then I'll go back and I'll start erasing stuff or moving stuff. This might be a good one for the contour editor. And just take this line and move it down. You can see that even that doesn't work all that wonderfully, so I can just erase it and get rid of it like that. I could also make my eraser smaller, but I like that size, generally speaking. I don't have too much of a problem with that. This might be a good place to just get rid of some junk in here. I'm also going to color this pencil in black, so it doesn't really matter if there are interior lines. But this one is the last one I'll get rid of with the pencil. If I do another one of these, you'll see it might go a little bit faster. Once you get into the groove of it, it gets faster and easier. But I'm also just going slow to make a point out of it. So for this one, I'll probably just draw it and finish that off that way. So point, gone. And then for this, get rid of that. And that's pretty much all I'll do to this detail, because none of this is going to show anyway. But a little bit of detail here and there will help make my overall drawing look more finessed. So now we've got the pencil in. And one thing that I could do is I could fill in the pencils. I could color them. I know it's going to be black, so I could just make that black and be done with it, but I'm going to leave it open for now. So go over to the other hand. And this one, I'm probably going to just use the contour editor to fix it up a little bit. And fix it up over on this side. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to finish off with the character's jacket and lapel. So I'll just draw a line for that and then clean it up later if need be. And for the character's body, I have the character going on to 2 layers when that arm rests on the table. That's so I don't have to keep drawing it over and over. But it isn't quite there yet. So. And for the bow tie, I'll check and see if I can use the last time that we saw the bow tie, which is maybe later in the scene, and make a determination if I can just cut and paste that or if I have to draw it. If I was good, and if I animated this well, which I probably didn't because I was doing it quickly, then I would be able to see from my animation itself that the bow tie is either working or it isn't. So what'll probably happen is after I see the animation playing at speed, I'll see that the bow tie isn't quite working the way I wanted it to. And I'll probably go back and make some corrections to it later. But for now, we'll see if I can get away with just drawing it freehand. And then fill in the line for the character's body. I didn't draw exactly on the line. I'll do that again. That's because if I draw this exactly on the line, it's going to create a tangent. It makes it look as if the line of the coat is coming right off of the tie, and we don't really want that. That doesn't make for nice volume drawings. By that, I mean, it wouldn't look like the character's got volume. It would look very flat. If I draw the character like this, it's going to be really, really flat. By contrast, if I draw the character like this, then it's going to look a little bit more dimensional. So by moving this line over just a little bit, either one way or the other, it doesn't matter at this point, then I keep this looking more three-dimensional and less like a flat poster drawing or something. Then I just have to work with I'm going to use a pen for that, but that's right. But then I just have to work with these collar pieces. I'm actually not happy with how they turned out, so I'm going to go back and fix these up later, but I'll just draw them in for now and not worry about that. But eventually these collars are going to have to be fixed up because they morphed over time. And this is a good time to point out that while I'm drawing, I sometimes get into uncomfortable angles. So here it's really hard for me to go in here and lay that line down because that's not the way that my arm goes naturally. My wrist goes like this. Sorry about the bonk. My wrist goes like this. And so that's the way I want to be able to turn my drawing so that I can draw in any angle I'm comfortable with. In this case, all I have to do is hold down Control and Alt, and I can rotate my drawing like so. I haven't actually done anything to my drawing. I've just rotated the view of it so that if I want to now go in here and lay down the drawing with an angle that's much more comfortable to my arm, then I can do that. And I can do it again here to just get it so that this is working the same direction that my hand likes to go. In this case, like that. And finish it off. And finish it off here. And that is more or less this drawing. So once I've done that part, then all I have to do is take a look at it and make sure that it's looking like the other drawings around it, that everything is more or less the same. And then I can move on to my next one. I'll clean this up a little bit before I do that. But then I just have to compare all my drawings and look at whether or not they're matching. So I'm just going to cut this part off. And this, get rid of it if I can. If I can't, then it's fine. And get rid of the inner part and keep the bow tie. Or move in really tightly and use the contour editor and get rid of it that way. So you can see why sometimes it's easier to just redraw it. Like, am I going to go in here and fuss with all this, or am I just going to go in there and erase it, draw it, make it look better? Or is it at a point where it really doesn't matter because no one's going to see it anyway? That's just something to think about when you're cleaning stuff up. So in this case, maybe because I kind of care about that, I just lower the size of the eraser and get in here and just erase some of that and get rid of it. The other stuff, I'm not too worried about that. It won't even show when I color it in. And if it does, I can fix it later. But that's more or less my drawing that I was working on that was in progress. And now I'll just flip between the previous drawing, turn off the rough, which is the layer below, and have a look at these and see how this most recent drawing fits in with the others. See if it's actually looks like the drawing is moving correctly as one character, or does it look like just another bad drawing next to the other one? So they're pretty far apart, so it might be hard to tell, but it does look as if the hands are roughly the same size and the character's moving forward. and the head shape is more or less the same. Probably could be better, but it's probably going to work for cleanup. The last thing I probably would end up is I missed a line on the character's feathers on the face. I'm going to go ahead and just add that in. And again, that's why I flipped it, so I could see that, oh, there was a line here. If you look at this line right there, you can see there was one there, so there ought to be one here. And the art of cleanup is making sure that those lines look like they're the same thing and they're not floating all over the place and changing length. So that is part of the art of it, is just knowing what you can leave out and what you have to include. All right, so I've got a pretty good drawing there. Not a bad time to save. I won't version up because this is just the cleanup pass in progress. That haven't affected anything, haven't ruined anything. And I'm happy with that drawing for now. I'll leave it. And now I want to go and find another drawing to work on. So, like I said, I worked on this scene for a long time. I know how the scene is set up. I'm looking for extremes. Extreme poses where it makes a difference, where I'm going to go in and do the in-betweens in between these key poses later, but these are the extremes that make the scene what it is. I could tell the whole story with just these particular drawings. And the way I knew which ones they were was the ones I gave the most drawing to in the first place. So I'm probably going to do this one next and start by creating a new drawing. So I go to drawings, create an empty drawing. I'm going to designate it a key by pushing this button up at the top of the screen. It's got a round circle with a key on it. And now I can flip back and forth between the last drawing I did and this one and make some determinations about how I want to proceed. Another thing I could do is this drawing might look like another drawing that I have later on in the scene. And so I can always look at later drawings and go, okay, well, does it look kind of like that one? Not really. How about this one, this one, this one? Getting there. It's kind of similar. That one's kind of similar. So I can look at these and decide, well, can I use some of that information? If I go back to this one, is that close to the one that I have? It's close. I don't know if it's close enough. There's the same angle, or at least a similar angle, but it's kind of a different expression and a lot's changed over the course of the scene. So if I make it look too much like that one, then maybe it's going to ruin the original drawing that I have. So it kind of looks like his face got fatter over the course of the scene. Maybe I want to keep that. So I'm going to start by taking this one and just copying and paste it and see how much I can get for free. Meaning, how much can I get if I don't spend any time drawing at all? So I'll just copy and paste it and then paste it onto this frame and just see how close they are. So if I rotate this, move it around, maybe I can get this drawing to match up with the one that's underneath it. At least I'll have some idea which size it's supposed to be. There we go. So I place it over the character's head. You can see that it changed a lot. The cheeks changed quite a bit. And I think I'm going to use that because I think I don't want his cheeks to squish as much. But I can see that the top of the head now looks about the right size. I can cut and paste the eyes and get them to match up a little bit better. I can use a lot of this. And rather than going in and redrawing, this will save me a lot of time that I would have otherwise spent. So I'm going to now just shut up and do some cutting and pasting and see if I can align this even further. So in this case, I don't think I want to keep what I'm doing with the cutting and pasting with this mouth, because it's going to make it more messy than if I just drew it. So there's an art to not being too lazy. And there's a good example of it. I can definitely keep these collar pieces, at least that one. And I could probably go over to the bow tie on this drawing and copy and paste it. And that'll save me from, not only save me from doing extra work, but it'll make it more consistent so that the shapes don't change too much. It's inevitable that your sizes are going to change as you go through the course of drawing a long animation scene. This one's pretty long. It's just part of the way our minds work, that you can't draw like a machine. You're going to morph and change things as you go. And so by copying and pasting things, I've been able to not only save myself from work, some of the effort, but I've also been able to maintain consistent size. So there's that. And then the rest of this, I'm going to get rid of this junk because it'll just get in the way. And then I can start drawing. All right, so I've cleaned this up a little bit. Just a couple last details that I'll take a look at, but I'm still ahead of the game as far as time and energy goes if I've copied and pasted this. And like I said, it isn't just copying and pasting, it's actually making this more consistent if I am able to grab stuff from another later on down in the scene. So one more thing, just want to fix this part up, and then I'm ready to start drawing a little bit more. And part of the cleanup process too is you want to make this look as if it was one line. You don't want to make it seem as if your line was labored over. You want to just make it look like it flows nicely and easily. And I'm not worried too much about that right now in this pass, but I will want to get into the eyes and face details, things like that. Right now, I'm just going to try and lay down the idea as fast as I can with as much energy as I have to draw with, because like I said, you eventually get to a point where you just don't have the energy anymore, and it's something that they don't tell you about, which is you're going to get tired eventually, and that's just part of the process. We would take long walks, we would get up and talk to our friends. There are all sorts of ways that you could deal with it. Somebody once told me, wise piece of advice is that there's nothing worth risking your health for. There's nothing worth risking your hand for. If you want to do this for a living, if you want to do anything with your hands creative for a living, you don't want to get rid of your hand by blowing it out on something too earlier in your career. And sometimes I see younger people who are animating and they are wearing wristbands, and not because they want to protect their hands, but because they're already in pain. And it makes me really sad, because in my 20 plus years in the business, I wasn't feeling anything until very nearly the end of when I was actually on the box computer animating. And I started to feel some pains in my hand. And I thought, oh, that's what everybody always complains about. But somehow magically, all these years, I didn't have to deal with it. I was able to survive without having any carpal tunnel or any complications with my hand. So I'm grateful for that. I'm not sure if it was my skill or if it was just dumb luck, but one way or another, I was able to save my hand. And I became acutely aware of the importance of saving your hand and not blowing it out, because that's, if you do this for a living, that is your living, and you don't want to be left high and dry, especially early on before you've even got a chance to prove yourself and have some fun in the industry. So I'm just adjusting things. I want to make this as close as I possibly can to the actual drawing underneath, so I can save myself some drawing power, but ultimately I'm going to get in here and draw a lot of it and not worry too much. So there's a little bit too aggressive, and I probably will erase some of this stuff rather than try to fuss with it. I'm going to keep this eye size because it matches the eye size from earlier, actually later in the scene. I think I'll get rid of the line in the bridge of the nose and just draw it in. But I still feel like I'm ahead of the game if I was able to get all that free stuff that I got from copying. And once again, I was able to keep the drawing more consistent because I was able to borrow stuff from later in the scene. And so things like the the eyelashes, that's going to now be a more consistent shape. And when I go to in between all this, that's going to be of crucial importance, because if the eyelashes are flickering and they're different shapes, then it's going to make it look really fluttery, for want of a better word. It's going to just be shimmering and fluttering all over the place, and that's takes you out of the scene, and it reminds you that you're watching some animation, and possibly very bad animation in some cases. So the more I can do to avoid that by making things consistent, the better off I am. And that's part of the cleanup process. Sometimes people disparage the cleanup process. I even did it for a while, because after a while I was pretty good at it. I was able to make a pretty good living doing cleanup for a living, which isn't technically animation, but you have to understand animation and you have to be good at it in order to follow up some animator's work and make it look nice. You have to understand what they were trying to accomplish, and you have to understand how to do a decent drawing based on their work. And I'll talk about experiences that I had some other time when there are actually people here listening, but suffice to say that it can be pretty interesting working with different styles of animation and having to keep it consistent. And yours, when you were a cleanup person, yours were the drawings that ended up on the screen. That is the actual drawing, not the animators, but the cleanup persons. And so it was a really important job that I perhaps didn't take that seriously sometimes, because I just thought, well, it isn't really animation, is it? It's actually taking someone else's animation and making it look good. But you have to be a good animator in order to make it work. Or at least you have to understand animation really well in order to make the drawings nice so that when they show up on the screen, it looks as if one person did it. Now, one thing that I like to do when I'm going through these drawings is continue to flip as I go and flip it from different angles. Like I've got the character sideways like this. Well, look at it sideways. And looking at it sideways, I can already see that some of the lines that I've drawn are a little too parallel, or they're going the wrong direction, or they're going in a direction I just didn't want them to, or maybe the drawing just doesn't look as good as I wish. There's also a mirror tool. If I straighten this out a little bit. So if I straighten the drawing out a little bit and pull it down, I can use this mirror tool and I can get a reverse angle on the drawing. And by looking at it from a reverse angle, I can see that it's really favoring one side. Again, I draw like this. That's just how my hand operates. And when I'm in here scrunching really tightly, I draw up to the right. And you can see now with the mirror on that it's going to the left, that it's actually pointing this direction. And I would go back and fix that if I was really into it, but I'm fairly happy with it. I don't notice it too egregiously when I play it at speed, so I'm going to let it go. But if I was doing this for a living, if I was being paid to do this, I would absolutely mirror it, look at it, and fix that stuff. And that means even if the original drawing had that in it, even if the animator's original drawing had that, I would at least consider fixing that and making sure that the drawing doesn't look too off kilter. But more or less, I would use it just to plus my own work and make sure that my drawings, regardless of the animator's drawings, hopefully respecting the animator's drawings, but are as good as they can be, that the character's on model and it looks like one person drew the whole thing, the whole scene, or the whole film. So there's a call I'm going to make. I'm going to make the cheek a little different here and erase some of that stuff and then lay in a line closer to the original one that I had. And in order to get this thing to go back to its original position, all I have to do is hit Shift X, and then I've got this back the way it was. And now I'm looking at the lines on the sides of the eyes. It doesn't look like the lines on the sides of the eyes go all the way down, which is what I've got here. So I'm going to erase this stuff and get rid of some of this stuff and then complete this side of the face. And might as well just plus this line a little bit because it got wonky, and then I'll finish off the eye. And again, just keep Control-Z handy, and if you don't like the line, draw it again, or draw it through and fix it up later. It doesn't really matter which. I'll do the other side of the head. When I was doing this for a living full time, I could actually draw the entirety of the character's head in one swoop. So that means I could start at one side of the character's head, go over to the other side and go like this, and put its feathers on, and it would be pretty close to perfect. Well, it's close. I mean, there's no such thing as perfect, but it would be really, really tight. It would look exactly like the animator's drawings. I honestly don't know how I did it. I think it just came from doing it every day, all day. And I had seen other animator assistants and cleanup people that were able to do that. I thought, ooh, I want to be able to do that. So I practiced at it. And I got to a point where I could draw the entire character in one line, which is kind of ridiculous now that I think of it. I'm not even sure why you'd want to. I think it was just a time consuming to sketch it in. Because originally when we would draw cleanup lines, you would use a feathered line, and that would get it so that you build up the line and make as perfect a line as you possibly could, again, by grinding into the paper, by building it up. Don't necessarily do it that way in ToonBoom. Generally speaking, I try to even drag the line, or sometimes I'll push the line, but I don't need to, in vector programs, go in and feather like this. And the only time I do is if, like I said, I want to connect the lines while I'm drawing. I've got some tangent going on here. Don't like that too much, so I'm going to change this line. So just putting that little extra edge on it gives it more of a dimensional feel and makes it a nicer drawing overall. All right, so go in here and lay down some lines to finish off the bottom of the head. And clean that up a little bit if it's getting kind of messy because of all the cutting and pasting. So I might just go in here and just clean that up. It's not that hard to draw those parts again. So connect this like so, and then finish it off over here. Now I'm tangenting this side right now, so I would probably want to go back and fix that up too. It doesn't really take that long to just make sure that things aren't lining up exactly on the edges. So I'll fix that up. But in this case, I kind of made a determination that maybe he is going to have his collar lined up flush with his face. So it's something like this. And that's kind of a design choice in this case. It's not hurting anything. If I go back and I look at my original drawing that I finished, the first one I completed, you can see that it ends up being flush against his head eventually. So it's not the end of the world if that isn't absolutely perfect, the offset. But in this case, looking at that drawing, now I see that it was actually the collar's inside the face. So I'm going to fix that up. Again, I'm going to in between all of these, and it's going to be crucial that my keys are the best drawings so that when I do go to in between everything, it looks consistent and it looks nice and clean. Let's finish off the collar over here. And then I'll clean those lines up because it doesn't have a very nice quality to it right now. So it's worth it to go back and just go, okay, now I know where the line's supposed to be. Let me just zap the original one and do a better job. So that's a little bit nicer. And then same thing over here. Part of the problem when you're a cleanup artist is you can't see the forest for the trees. You get very much into the details. It's almost impossible for me to watch anything with 2D animation that's been hand-drawn like this. Not the cutout animation stuff that uses puppet rigs, but stuff like this where a person went through and actually hand drew the cleanup line and not noticed the details. Now, again, with this, this isn't for anything in particular. It's just me having fun. And so I'm not being as precious about it. But after doing it for 10, 12 years, however long I did it, it's hard to let it go. So here I only have to draw one of the hands because the other hand is on another layer. So I'm going to just focus in on this hand. Now I'm going to use this hand over and over, so I probably want to do a nice job. So I'll use anything I can from before. So look through the scene. There's one that's kind of similar. Not the same angle though. Here's one that's kind of similar. That one's definitely similar. Let me see if I can compare the two and use this. It's pretty close. I might be able to just copy and paste the hand entirely, and that will save me. It's the last one. Nope, definitely not. Yeah, the last one that's up in the air. So I might be able to copy and paste this one and use it verbatim. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to try and copy and paste this onto my current drawing and see how much of it I can use. And sometimes trying this, I go, oh, no, there's no way I can use all that. It's just in a completely different angle. It's a different size. And it's not going to work at all. But at the very least, I can use the pen. So I'm going to line it up a little bit and then stick it in position and see if there's anything on here I can use. And I might make a determination too. It's like, well, it isn't like the animation hand, but it's more consistent with what comes after. So maybe I'll use that. But yeah, in this case, I think I'll cut and paste some of the fingers and place them in the right place. I'll keep the volumes, but I'm not going to worry too much about the placement of the fingers themselves. I just want to have the volumes match. So I'll try moving these into place and see if that helps. And then if it's close enough, I'll call it a day. And I think it is close enough. So I think I'll now just work with cleaning up what I've got here or redrawing some of it. And at least, again, the volumes are fairly consistent. You can see if I turn off the cleanup, the thumb I originally drew, it's in a position and a different position, and it's also a different volume. So when I was drawing at the end, I was thinking in different terms than I was drawing at the beginning. And I have to just decide these things. So do I want to keep that or do I want to leave it? So I think I'll keep the thumb, and then I'll maybe redraw the tops of the fingers because that's kind of messy anyway. And we'll see how that looks. But again, by cutting and pasting like this, I'm still doing better than if I had just draw it again from a volume standpoint. And erase it down to the nubs. So again, there's no fast and easy way to get rid of this stuff. It requires that you go in and you have to think about it. But at least I got some stuff for free. And I was always going to use the pencil anyway from another place in the scene. So this way I got some stuff for free. Now I'm going to rotate the canvas again. And by the way, that's icon that shows up is actually a disc. It's a animation disc like we used to use in the olden days. And we actually would rotate the disc itself. So we had a big metal disc that you would rotate. And if you were in the midst of things, you'd get really good at just spinning it like a steering wheel. And you could do it secondhand with your left hand while you were drawing, and that would just come automatically. You didn't even think about it. And that's one of the things that happens when you do something all day long. But in this case, it's just wonderful to be able to draw using a pegboard system, using an animation disc, all these things that ToonBoom can do that replicate stuff that we used to do in animation when we were doing it without computer assistance. One of the comments I get most frequently from people, whether I'm doing CG animation or 2D animation, is people ask, are you drawing that right on the computer screen? And I laugh and think about how best to answer that. The answer is no. And that's all I have to say about the subject. But as you can see, anyone who's interested in this sort of thing knows that you need specific software that has specific tools. And in this case, ToonBoom is really good at replicating the experience of drawing analog or drawing on paper by hand. I'd like to think of this, I didn't come up with this term, but I like to use it a lot. Just the idea of tradigital. Tradigital drawing is you're using traditional animation techniques, but you're using digital software to achieve those ends. And so you combine the two and they become tradigital. So there's another one. And again, when I'm done, I want to just make sure I didn't miss anything, which I did. So let's finish some of this stuff off. When it comes to inking and painting this thing, I would eventually use a closed gap option that ToonBoom has, but I'm not going to do that now. Something I can talk about another day. In this case, I can't really use these flaps, which are basically supposed to be his head feathers. I can't use them because they're not anywhere near the shape that they were later in the scene. I could probably go back and look for a place in the scene where they were like that, but I'll just draw it. It's faster if I just draw this and go in there and try and copy and paste something that's amounts to 4 lines. So right now, it looks as if these feathers on the head are actually behind the character's head. I'm going to look through my scene and see any evidence that says, oh no, they should actually be in front of the line of the character's head. I'll just do a quick check just for consistency's sake. It looks like they always are behind the character's head except when he leans forward. And this is a scene I haven't worked on for a really long time. So one of the things that you can do when you're plotting out a scene, which you should do, is do a character model sheet. And that means you're going to look at the character from all different angles and decide how the character looks in different situations. And so you don't have questions about, well, do the feathers in the head go behind or in front of this line of the character's head? And so again, I didn't do that because this is just for me and I know this character enough. But I do want to double check and make sure that I haven't changed anything too drastically. So in this case, if sometimes the feathers are in front and sometimes they're in back, it could get pretty messy. And so I want to make sure that I've addressed that. And the best way to do that is by going in and checking other drawings and making sure that everything's consistent. Now you can see in here I'm messing around with the Bezier handles, very much like Illustrator, like you could do. Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't. It's just that I'm already there. So I'm like, I'll just finish it off. But ordinarily, if it's going to be that much trouble to go in and fix something up, I just redraw the line. So you can see I'm sitting here and messing with this, and that might take me a long time. Or I can just go in with my pencil line and draw it, and maybe I'm done with it. In this case, it's not perfect, but maybe it's close enough. Or I can turn on the line joining tool, and that's going to try and match the drawing ends to each other. So you can see on this one, it actually worked out great. And this one, maybe not so much, but again, that's not going to show when I'm done. All right, with the line joining tool on, I'm going to go in and lay these feather lines in on the top of the head, and then that finishes this drawing off. So I'll just swoop it in. And the feathers are moving a lot, so it's more important that I get the shape right than make it look exactly like the animation. But I want to up the smoothing on this. I want it to be a really nice swoopy drawing. I'm starting from the base because that's where I want it to connect. And I don't want to go in and use the cutter tool. Now you can see that because I've got line join on, it made the other line disappear. So I'll turn that off. So like I said, I have a hotkey for that, but it's not working all of a sudden. So I'll just do this. But so there you go. That was easier to draw it than even to talk about it. Just go in and draw it. Sometimes the best tools in the world won't help you just draw. And if you want to hand draw 2D animation, you have to be at least reasonably good at drawing. And you have to really like to draw, even if you're not that good. But now I can take a look at the final drawing. I want to turn off the rough and make sure that I didn't miss anything. Of course, it's missing an arm. Again, that's because eventually I will use the arm that's on another level. So if I turn that on, you can see that's on another level, and I can match it to that. In fact, I'll just do that right now because I'm going to have to do it eventually anyway. But I have a cleanup version of the arm that I can use, and this just saves a lot of time if you've got something on another level that isn't moving, and it also looks better. So it's good to keep that in mind as you're going through. How can I economize? How can I actually get my drawings to look better by not having to work that hard and by keeping the volumes the same? All right, so I'm going to flip between the two of these. It looks like the collar is changing a lot. And like I said, I'm actually working on that as we speak, so I will probably go back and fix that. But just right now, I think I can actually make some calls about it. Looks like it's probably this one that's the problem anyway. So what I might do is I'll just erase this for now, and I'll go back and hit it later. It's not a bad idea to just go, you know what, I'll do a collar pass, and it probably, when I'm not working live, I'll go through and reassess that and make some decisions about what I'll do with the collar. But I'm not going to do it right now. But for the most part, this looks like the same character. It looks like it in between. It looks like the nose is getting kind of gnarly now. It's lost some volume, or it's either lost volume or it's gained volume. So I check the other drawings and go, okay, what does the nose look like? It changes quite a lot. The important thing is it going to look completely different from drawing to drawing? And is that going to matter when I'm done? In this case, I just think that this doesn't look very nice. So I'm going to go and fix it up a little bit. And again, once I've got all my keys set up, I will make one last call and change some of these things that are currently, that I'm letting go when I do like a final key pass. You know, all right, do I want to keep this or do I want to get rid of it? That will be another pass that I do later. But right now, I just want to get as many of these knocked out as I can, because you can always work with something. If you don't have anything, then it's a little bit harder. So, all right, so there's another one done. I'll save that and not version up, just save it where it is. So with the time remaining, I'd probably do one of these ones where the character's running. So I'll turn on the rough and take a look at this. So same thing, to get started with my scene, if I was starting this fresh, I would look for key positions, key extremes, anytime the character is completely visible and on model and that it's going to affect the rest of the drawings from that point on. So in this case, I know I started with drawing one, so I'll just start with that one. And I'm just going to go through the whole process of drawing. I'm not going to draw the pencil because it doesn't even show, but I'll just draw this entire thing as if it was fresh and clean. And I don't really have to pay too much attention to the other drawings because this one looks so much different than them. The angle is so much more extreme than the other drawings that I can take some liberties and it's not going to matter too much. So I'm just going to start drawing away. I'm making some choices. I don't think his face being as flat as it was when I first started the scene is working. So I'm going to change that. His head got a lot rounder as the thing progressed. And I just know that because I've been working on it for a while. So I'm filling out his head. This isn't not uncommon experience when dealing with cleanup animation. I'm going to change the ears. I'm going to make them look more like I know they look later on in the scene. Because when I started this, I had different ideas and it just morphed over the course of the scene. I call them the ears, but they're just like these ear feather flaps that owls have. But many was the time we would actually take a drawing that doesn't look anything like the character and resuscitate it. That's what I call it. Give it life, make sure it looks like it's on model. So in this case, it was pretty off model. The character changed a lot between the first one drawings I made and the last one. That's just how it works sometimes. So I'm going back and I'm making some calls about how I want to fix it up, make it look like it's on model again, and using some of the tools I introduced early on. There are people who will tell you, oh, don't do this kind of detail work when you're first drawing. Go ahead and lay everything down first, and then go back and clean up these little points. The problem I see with that is if you do that, you'll maybe forget some of the things that you were working on at the time. Right now, I'm all into the back of the character's head. And so I know exactly what needed to be fixed, and I can fix it in just a moment or two. Also, this isn't even in the scene. If I zoom out, you can see it's not in the scene, but I was there. I might as well just fix it up. So that's one of those do as I say, not as I do. Maybe lay everything in completely and then go back and fix it up. But I didn't do that in this case. I'm going to zoom in, draw the eye. This might be a good opportunity to use the ellipse tool. There's a tool underneath the T, which is for text. If you go into that tool, left mouse click on it and hold down, you'll see there's an ellipse. And an ellipse is a really nice way to get a nice circular shape without having to draw it. And sometimes you don't want to use that. Sometimes you actually want to just draw it and make it look a little more organic. But in this case, the eye should be nice and round, and it should have a nice round quality. And I could fuss over this for hours and never get a really nice rounded circle. And in this case, all I had to do was create an ellipse, and now the work's been done for me. So there's an example. You might also sometimes want to turn off your cleanup layer and compare. Okay, does that look right? I mean, it's close. I would rather have the eye tilting back a little more now than the angle I originally drew it at. And based on that, now I can fill in the rest of the eye. You could probably use an ellipse for the outside of the eye too, but I'm going to get a little more picky about it. I want it to be a very specific shape. So I'm just drawing it by hand. And I've got the smoothing really high, so it's going to want to smooth it out a little bit anyway. And then make a determination if I want to get rid of some of this stuff or not. Again, the cutter tool can sometimes work really wonderfully. Sometimes it doesn't get you what you wanted. And there it was nicely handled. It was a nice way to get rid of that extra layer of the eye. So I'm now going to lay in the eyelashes. One thing that you probably would consider doing in a case like this is using a thinner pencil for a thinner pencil head for something like this. It would probably look better if I lowered it. I've got it on 5 right now. If I lowered it, but instead, I'm going to just keep it at the size I've been working with that right now. All right, so I will erase these. And just draw the line. I think I will actually rotate this and make it a little easier to draw the eyelashes. And this part of the character is moving really fast. This part of the scene character is moving really fast. And as a result of that, I don't have to be quite as precious about the details as I would be otherwise. So I'm just going to rough in the brow like that. If it becomes a problem later, then I can always go back and fix it up. But that will do as far as the eyebrow size. And I'll just finish it off with these kind of Disney-ish color separations, which I did not draw the first time through, so that might be a problem later. It's kind of a problem with the cheek. But this is stuff that we would have to decide as cleanup artists. Not everything would be there when we were doing cleanup lines over animators' drawings, and that's why you had to be a good animator. Is you had to make it look right, make it look like one person drew the entire thing, and even if all the information wasn't there via the animator's original drawings. I'm going to try the contour editor for this, extend that line, use the cutter to get rid of stuff below the cheek line if I can. If not, I'll go in and erase it. And pull this other face separation line down a little bit. And so there's the eye. And I'll finish up the rest of the face. So once again, the beak has probably changed a little bit. I've also never drawn it at this angle throughout the scene, so I can just kind of go for it. I know how the cheek was supposed to look because I've drawn this character a few times. And the mouth is kind of complicated, so I'll probably just clean this up a little bit once I've got all the lines available. But again, I'm doing it section by section. I'm not worried so much about drawing all the lines first and then going back. I actually want to work on one section at a time. It just is going to make my life easier, I think, at this stage of the game. So now that I've laid in some of those lines, I can just hook all this stuff up. I also could have used the line join tool, but it's making me kind of crazy at the moment. So I'd rather just go in and fix it up manually. I think that the line join tool is probably best for more squared off shapes. And if you're doing rounded things, it's probably not your best tool to use. But it's wonderful that it exists. So I'm just fixing some of these places up where the line isn't quite lined up with parts around it. I've also not addressed the inside of the mouth. I'm going to hold off on that because I've not yet decided how much I want to show of the inside mouth. This is not a good idea. Again, listen to what I say, not what I do. You should make those determinations when you're animating, but this was kind of a work in progress on the fly. So I wasn't sure when I was animating it if I even wanted to show the tongue or if I'm just going to use a color and call it a day with that. And I still haven't decided, so I just decided to start cleaning it up. But that's bad. You should never, ever do that. So you heard it here first. Never, ever, ever leave stuff like that to chance when you're starting the cleanup process. Because imagine I go through and I animate this mouth, and then I realize that I did it all wrong. Now I got to go back and fix it all up. So it's just a good idea to keep as much detail into your animation in your first pass as you possibly can, and then go back and when you're cleaning it up and not have to worry about some of these things. Here's another example where I haven't worked this out yet. I haven't decided, how do I want to represent the lip or the mouth? Do I want it to actually be like a lip? In which case I would change some of this stuff and give it a little bit of an edge and lay the lines in like that. Or do I want it to be flat flush? And then if I put a tongue in, start to see it looks a little bit more mouth-like. Or do I want it to stay flat? It's not so much important which one I do, it's just important that I keep it consistent throughout the scene and not change my mind halfway through the scene. Otherwise, if you do that, you're going to get a lot of fluttery effects. So for the time being, I think I will do something like this for the inside of the mouth and carry that through. The character is only seen from this angle for a little while, so it really doesn't matter. But I think that looks better. So I'll stick with that for the mouth right now. Again, I'm only doing the key poses at this point, and when I'm done with all the key poses, I'll go ahead and review them all and make sure that everything looks right. These little feathers on the side of the face were there to just help determine that the character's got feather points on the side of its face. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to keep that or not, but when I originally drew the character, it had them, so I've got them for now. And I'm just going to go in and lay down the lines for the arms. I'm actually not going to draw the back arms because they're not going to be seen. So in the interest of saving some time, I'll just eliminate them for now, and I'll draw them on the next key as needed. A lot of times with rough animation, you're either drawing things that aren't going to make it into the final drawing just so that you know where you came from and where you're going with your scene. A lot of times in rough animation, you leave stuff off and you assume that either you or whoever assists you on a scene is going to clean it up later. So it's silly to draw something over and over and over again that is just going to be in between. And if you're in a hurry, if you're working on a production, you can just let either whoever's assisting you do it, or you can do it yourself if you're working from home. But you don't have to draw it on the rough animation pass. So I've left some things off in this scene, not too many, because I was doing this for students to look at and wanted them to see the entire process. But if I was doing this myself, I would leave a lot of drawings off and then just complete them in the cleanup process. All right, now I'll do the hand. It used to be that I found hands really difficult, and then I just found myself practicing drawing them again and again, over and over, and I got really good at it. And then I stopped drawing for a long time, and I got really bad at it again. So that taught me that being able to draw, having the skill to draw something, is a muscle that you have to keep exercised. Otherwise, it will go away. And so hopefully one day I might be back to where I was when I was drawing cleanup all day long and working off of people's animation who are masters in the business. But I can definitely feel that I don't have the chops I once had, but I still have it. It's still there. I just need to exercise it more. And by the time I'm done with this scene, I can be pretty sure that I'll have my drawing skills back after drawing this thing over and over and over again. But I'm just gonna finish this thing off with the time we have. So I've just got the body left to do, and then the feet. Now, this is one of those situations where the smoothing saved me, because I wasn't able to do this curve of the belly without it. And with smoothing on, I was actually able to lay in a pretty smooth line. So I'm a big fan of smoothing, even though sometimes it makes me nuts and I have to turn it down more. But overall, I like to keep it pretty high. And I'm a big fan of really smooth lines in general, because that's how we always drew in the business. If I'm doing something that's still, maybe I want a little more character, but because this is moving, I just want to get it and get it as fast as possible. And as I said at the beginning, the longer you do this, the more warmed up you get, the faster it starts going. So by the time that you're wrapping up and doing in-betweens, you can be flying through these like 4 every hour. I've done about 2.5 in 2 hours, and I was going really slow and being methodical and making lots of little dumb mistakes and things. But once you get up and running, and if you've got something cool to listen to, you can sit and draw 4 of these an hour, and, or maybe even more. Or I could, at least, if I was up and running and going at full speed. So just a few more details left. Again, I'm not drawing outside of the lines. What I'm going to do when I'm done is close it off so that I can paint it later. These collars, as I said, they're problematic. So I'm going to look at the last collar and compare and just kind of get a feel for how big the collar is supposed to be. If I look at the last one, it looks like this. So I'll go back to this drawing and just make it bigger and give it a different angle so it matches better with the other ones. It's going to look something more like this, and then bleed off. Don't really like how that point went. I could fix it up a number of ways, or I could just draw it again. And you can see that the smoothing helped me out there a little bit. All right, so now I'll go through and look at this, see if there's anything I want to clean up with the cutter tool. This is a little bit more what I do for my own drawings as far as the cutter tool. I did it a lot at the beginning just to show the tool and that it exists and you can do stuff with it. But ordinarily, I wouldn't want to do too much more than this with the cutter tool and the contour. If it's more messed up than this, then odds are it just needs to have a redraw. Just go back and lay the line in again. So just fixing up a few little details here and there. That doesn't take too long, but going in and kind of how I did it at the beginning, where I was really going in and fixing a lot of details and going very slowly, that's just not productive as far as time goes. But I wanted to show it's an option in case anyone watches this and is interested. So now that I've got this set up, I'll turn off the rough and compare it to the original and just make sure I didn't miss anything. And then I'll compare it to the next drawing and make sure that it's consistent with how the character looks. So now I can see that the character actually looks a little bit more like it did originally. It's actually looking more on model than it was when I was starting out animating. These are the first drawings that I did when I started out. And as a result, I was still kind of getting into it. But now if you compare this drawing to the next one, it looks a little bit more like the character than it did originally when I was just doing the roughs. And I'll designate this as a key so I can flip through them and compare just by using the buttons at the top of the screen. So definitely looks a little bit more on model than it did when it was just the rough. And that again is one of the things that you do with cleanup is put things back on model so that character didn't look quite like it does later in the scene. And then now I've corrected that, and I'll follow that through with the subsequent in-betweens. Everything after the key phase will be relative to the keys that I created. So now I'm just going to draw a line here and close off the ends so that these are complete shapes. So when I go to paint this at some future point, then I will be able to paint it because it's closed off. And what I can do is hold down Shift while I use the pencil tool and create a perfectly straight line, which is also helpful if you have objects that aren't organic. This is a way of drawing a perfect straight line that will close off the paint, but I just held down Shift to do that. So now I'll turn off the rough, take another look. When I go back to paint this, there may be some things I need to still close off. I'm not going to worry about that too much because we're almost done today, but you can't really paint things, at least in a simple way. It becomes harder to paint things if they're not closed off. If it's closed off, then it's really easy to paint things. In fact, I might just do that now just for laughs. I can go to the last drawing and compare and see how that thing was colored. Let's zoom out a little bit. And maybe lay some of those colors down on the scene. The drawing that I've started with. So I definitely was using the brown color for the face. Let's see how it looks. If I get into here, I can use this color, and the paint tool is currently hidden, so I'm probably not going to mess with it today. So I wouldn't color this at this point anyway, so I'm not going to mess around with it. This is all just about cleanup, but when I'm done, I can for sure check to see if all the gaps have been closed and if the thing is paintable. And if it isn't, then I just have to close the gaps, which is a whole separate topic, painting. But for now, this is what I have for my cleanup. I'll just zip through these really fast to show what I've got accomplished. So a few drawings today. Now you can see that it is a time-consuming process, but if you want it to look nice, you have to put in the time. As a lot of the students that we work with figure out really quickly, one of the things that can help you save time is make your characters more simple. So this character has a lot of detail on it. I specifically wanted to do something that was a little more detailed. If I ever have the wherewithal, I'll probably even consider going in and laying in some tones and highlights. But in this case, I already have a lot more detail on it than I would recommend doing for people who are just starting out. So color separations around the eyes and the mouth. He's got a bow tie. He's got collars. He's got arm collars as well. And it's just a lot of stuff to juggle, a lot of different things that you have to juggle when you're going back and cleaning it up and then coloring it. And it's enough as an animator to just make sure that you can make something look like it's moving and that it has a life of its own and has character without having to worry about, but are the feathers staying the right thickness all through the scene? Or is the beak staying the right shape? And I don't mean like in an animation way. I mean like, is it exactly the right shape? Which is what I would do next, is I would go through and start comparing with these keys that I have set up. I still have some keys left to do before I do this, but go through with each of my keys and start comparing them. There's a great way to do that in this program. You can take your drawings off the peg. Again, I'm not going to talk about it too much because that's more of a lesson and I'm just doing a demo here. But you can go into the X sheet, which I haven't talked about at all, and it's a lesson thing. Look at some of my drawings. I'll take two here. Select these two drawings, go into the X sheet, and I can send these drawings to the desktop. If I then turn on the onion skin, and if I'm smart and a little bit lucky and everything works out according to plan, then eventually I'm able to take drawings off of the X sheet and utilize them in a way that I can compare sizes. But again, I'll probably save that for another day because it's a little bit more involved and we're basically out of time. But it's just something to think about. It's an option. It's something that you can do, is you can compare and contrast different drawings by taking them on and off the X sheet and comparing them. And then rather than just looking at them like this, I can really physically go in and move the drawings around and get a feel for whether or not the shapes are working properly. So that is all I'm going to cover today. I'm going to run this thing one more time just so you can see the animation itself. With the cleanup, it's not going to make much of a difference, but you can at least see, again, the scene as it was in progress and where I am as far as the cleanup process goes, and get an idea of what this scene is going to look like when it's done. I'm going to up the opacity a little bit on the drawing. Then put the two and turn that off. And then just play it at speed. So there you can see the actual animation once again, just to compare. So that's what it will look like when it's done, if that ever comes to pass. And I'll turn off the rough, and you can look at just the key drawings, which don't look like anything because it's just, there's only a few of them. And then last but not least, I'll click on each one of the keys so you can see how it's looking. And that, as they say, is that, and that's showbiz. I'm out of here. Hope to see some friends in here eventually, and hope you enjoyed the cleanup demo, and sayonara.